Hello, my name is Lynette Baskett, Director of Club Engagement and Regionals for HFTP. Welcome to today's webinar, The Basics of Ethics. Many view the business world as filled with nothing but keen, cutthroat competition, where one needs to figure out a way to be on top of everyone else in order to succeed. In doing so, it becomes easy to fall into traps, take shortcuts, slide down the wrong path, and simply forget the basics of ethics. In reality, business and ethics must go hand in hand. This session will review the basics of ethics and provide you with the keys to an ethical business environment. Agnes DeFranco is professor and the Conrad N. Hilton Distinguished Chair at the University of Houston. She is an author of over 100 academic refereed articles, a number of non-refereed publications, and 5 textbooks. Agnes is an HFTP Global Past President, past Treasurer of the International Council on Hotel, Restaurant, and Institutional Education, and past President for Phi Kappa Phi and Phi Beta Delta, both honor societies at the University of Houston. Besides serving on committees and charities, the Global Hospitality Accounting Common Practices Advisory Council for HFTP, she is also a member of the Financial Management Committee in the American Hotel and Lodging Association. Terry Price is principal owner for HFT Consulting Group and has worked in the hospitality industry for over 25 years. He is an HFTP Global Past President and has presented at numerous hospitality conferences throughout his career. Terry received 2 Bachelor of Science degrees in Accounting and Computer Information Systems and served as an officer for the Alpha Kappa Psi business fraternity. He also played the banjo in a bluegrass band that toured around the western North Carolina region and had the good fortune to play at the 1982 World's Fair in Knoxville, Tennessee. Terry still enjoys playing the banjo, singing, and on occasion, tearing up the turf on a golf course. Welcome, Agnes and Terry. At this time, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, either afternoon, morning, or evening, depending on where you're at. We appreciate you taking time to join us today and talk a little bit about ethics. What we're going to do today is try to give you some guidelines. As we know, ethics is a very broad topic. It's a very widely discussed topic, and there's many opinions and many directions that you hear concerning ethics out there. And so we're hoping to give a little bit of guideline, a little bit of direction to help steer your path towards understanding where the ethical boundaries may be, and also how to create organization ethics within your company and be able to do that and have some key factors to take home with you. So today we're going to look at these topics. We're first going to talk about defining ethics in the best way we can, and talk about how it affects us in our hospitality world, within our human nature and personal and business. And at the end, again, some take-homes that will be provided you for this direction. So first, ethics defined. There's many definitions that people have been hearing and using for quite a while. I've attended many ethical webinars and sessions and read several articles about it, and you'll see all kinds of different definitions. And a lot of it is very vague in its application. So in an attempt to try to come up with an ethical definition, we've tried to come up with one that has a little bit more teeth to it, or a little bit more black and white standards to it, as much as possible, to give us some guidelines. Because we're being accountants and IT professionals, we're more black and white individuals than gray. So trying to give something that we can take home and try to apply to our everyday business lives. So the definition that we came up with is professional ethics is the manner in which the people who place reliance in the performance of your professional duties expect you to respond as it pertains to associated policies, laws, regulations, and agreements. So basically what this means is professional ethics is the manner people expect you to respond. In any situation you run into when it comes to are you applying ethical standards or not. You have people that are involved in this that you, as your professional, either accountant or IT professional, your role is to be in the stead of that person. Sometimes that person is your guest. Sometimes that person is your boss or your company. And so in each situation, you need to identify who those people are. And then once you identify the people that they're relying on you to do your job appropriately according to how the policies, the laws, and the regulations are laid out, spells out how you should respond in an ethical manner. And we'll have some cases later in the presentation to try to apply some of these things. But so we're going to talk about the different pieces and how that organizes in our world. So if we look at hospitality, you know, hospitality is a people business. We're in the business of people. Whether you're in a club and you have your members, whether you're in a hotel resort and you have your guests, we all are in the people business. So each one of our jobs, the people that come to our properties and come to our clubs are expecting us to behave in certain manners concerning items that pertain to, in the case of finance. So we have to look at ethical responsibilities, and we have to identify these people. But there's a lot of things in our companies that make things a little bit, you know, can be considered as gray issues. So, I mean, some of these items, you look at these, you know, some people, if you think of the people like guests or whatever, might consider issues like, you know, fine print in a contract or overbooking rules that you do, misleading information on websites. Are those pictures that are on your website a real indication of your property? There's all kinds of things that are considered by the outside that people might say, well, that's unethical if you do it that way. But, you know, when we go back to our definition, you know, if it's within the policies and laws and regulations, is it really considered unethical? So you have a lot of things in here. I mean, if you look at the last one down there, taking bribes for favors, you know, we're in the hospitality industry. Isn't the greasing the palms part of the business? But is that really considered an ethical behavior? If you're the one that doesn't get the table because you didn't grease the palm of the host or hostess, is that really an ethical standard or practice to do? And how would that person expect you to respond in that situation? So we have to look at all the little nuances within our organizations and look at these things. And there's a lot of interpretation depending on the person that you're trying to represent. Because in any situation, when you have two people involved, you're going to have differences of opinion. And that's where we as professionals have to look at both sides of the fence and understand which one that we're supposed to apply the rules and the regulations to. But ethics overall would be fairly easy if it wasn't for the humans. If the humans were not involved, this whole thing would be easy. But unfortunately, we do have to deal with humans. We have to deal with humans in both our guests and our employees. And as you can see from this slide, I mean, human behavior is unpredictable. And many of you throughout your careers, I'm sure, have dealt with somebody that is considered unruly, and they are not willing to listen to your side of the story. They only have their side of the story, and that is what they fervently believe. And you have to deal with that situation, and that person may consider you operating in an unethical manner. But you have to, again, weigh that out in the presence of all the factors that you have to determine if you are behaving in an ethical manner or not. So let's talk about our employees just for a quick minute. How do you onboard your employees when you get new employees. Most of the time, you're probably attending some orientation and training on their first couple of days of employment. And through that, you go through some welcomes, you enter some paperwork, you have compensation going over their benefits, all the policies they need to understand, the training of their job. They need to know the dress code, how to use the computers. They need to, understand safety issues for OSHA and things like that, and parking passes. But what's missing on this list, and I think this is something that's missing in a lot of training sessions out there, and that is ethics. Is ethics in your orientation packet? Is your ethics policies brought up and mentioned and spelled out and going through scenarios of how you would expect your employees to behave in an ethical manner? Because your employees are going to represent your organization. So I believe we all need to make sure that within our orientation packets and in our that we include our policies concerning ethics. But, why do we need to train people on ethics? Isn't that simple? Isn't ethics just the difference between right and wrong? Well, it's not quite that easy, as we've talked about, because there's a lot of fuzziness to ethics based on how people respond and how people, what their side of the story is. Is that ethics, does it become unethical once it reaches a certain level? Or is it, what is that line in the sand? Should ethics be as fuzzy as people make it out to be? And I think that this is where a lot of people get mixed up between the difference between personal ethics and business ethics. Business ethics should be more black and white than personal ethics probably is. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. But if you look at these things, there's some ethic things that are pretty easy to understand. I mean, Enron, WorldCom, Wells Fargo, there was some obvious things that everybody in the business world considered they were doing unethical practices. But are they the minimum, or should we superimpose our own self-ethics on top of that? Like breaking the speed limit. When is it considered breaking the law? 1 mile over, or as we mostly all do, 9 miles over, or sometimes even 14 miles over. Is the ethic standard whether the police officer will pull us over or not? So those are the things that create a lot of fuzziness. Now, if we talk about putting our, when people start comparing personal and professional ethics is where it starts getting very, very blurred when this happens, because personal ethics are affected by many different things. How you were brought up, your family values, your religious beliefs, experiences, even gender and generation can affect how people's personal ethics are made and how and what their standards are. So if you look at like generational ethics, just real quick, looking at the different generations that are out there, just asking some basic questions. Must lie to succeed. The older generation, traditionalists, 10%, 11% for the boomers, up to 36% for the millennials. So the millennials are feeling like, based on this survey, that they must lie to succeed. So when they're wrapping a professional ethics standard in their mind, what are they using as that litmus test? Even the point, if you looked at the next to last one, which is my favorite question, that they actually lied on the survey that was given, 11% of millennials agree that they lied on this survey even. So what's important about that is, as we were talking before, each company needs to have their own professional ethics policies in place and how they're going to run that organization. Now, that's where personal ethics and professional ethics start blending, because the people that are creating the policies to run the organization are applying their own personal ethics standards to those policies. Now, naturally, everything when it comes to laws always trumps that. But sometimes within laws, you've got gray areas that will cause it to be a challenge. So if you think about it, if this millennial generation, as they start getting into management level decision-making things, if they have a ethical standard that's at a different pendulum than what we're used to in the older generations, then we can start seeing some issues within the professional ethics world if we're not careful. So we have to look at these things, and each person has to identify themselves on how they're going to react. So if you take for example, if you find a wallet and it has $5 or $100 in it, what are you going to do? What's your reaction to that going to be? And this is where integrity kicks in. Integrity is defined as how you behave when no one else is looking. So if you find a wallet that has $100 in it, nobody else is around, nobody else in the world would know what the situation is, how would you react? And that's one of the questions that you constantly have to ask yourself whenever you're applying this thing, or you're trying to develop policies within your organization as to the questions that you need to be asking yourself. So I'm going to turn this over to Trevor for our first polling question.
Excellent. On your screen, you should see the first polling question. What are some factors that affect personal ethics as discussed earlier? First option, a particular city and climate where one is born. 2, a type of sports and food that one likes. 3, generation, culture, and religious beliefs. Or 4, name given to a person and his or her knowledge. We'll give everybody about 20 more seconds to fill out this question. All right, the results are pretty conclusive. 100% of attendees have selected generation, culture, and religious beliefs.
Well, that's awesome.
Well, thank you, Trevor.
All right.
Apparently they listen.
That's wonderful. So, Terry, maybe you and I can just pack up and go home because everybody knows the answers already.
They've got it down. We can move on.
So what is ethics? And we talked about that. And what we're looking at here is ethics in business. And one thing that we look at is if we don't have a solid ethical background for our business, and although personally you have all the ethics, but in your place of business and the ethics is lax, that ethics can turn into fraud very easily. And what do we mean by that? Now, many of you also know from fraud that there's a fraud triangle, which has pressure, opportunity, and rationalization. And pressure, as according to the definition, is an individual has a financial need, and he or she believes that that need cannot be solved through legitimate means. So there's a pressure that, and it can be anything. It can be certainly everybody is good in your household, but somehow it's a 2-income household, but one person got sick, or they got laid off because of the economy or whatever it is. And because of that, the bills start coming and piling in, and we're not able to make the payment for our house. So if we want to keep our house, then we need to somehow do something. But there's no legitimate means for me to do that because we try to find a job and we can't. So that's the pressure. But at work, if there are no good controls and opportunity exists, things might happen. So let's say Terry and I work together in the accounting department, and Terry is supposed to take care of all the cash and, log in all the receipts and so on, and then I'm supposed to make deposits. We're really good in segregating our duties. But let's say Terry is the good one, and he goes on vacation, and I'm the bad person here. But I'm really not that bad. It's just because I had pressure at home. So because of that, now I see an opportunity. I see a pile of checks, and I see that, hey, you know what? If I just take one and not deposit it, I might be able to take this to a cash checking place and get the money that I need, and I can take care of my bills, and I can keep my house, and so on. And we're not even talking about greed here, okay? We're just talking about the pressure. And when the opportunity arises, then what we only need at that point is just a little bit of rationalization. And people rationalize all the time. As we said earlier, we are human. We're trying to figure out why things happened. And when we have pressure and opportunity, I might just be looking at, hey, by the way, I worked in this place for 5 years, and I've only gotten one raise. And I'm just trying to get this check right now because I have a need. I'll put the money back or whatever it is. Or it is just a loan, I'll pay it back. And that's when things start sliding. As Lynette said earlier, too, at the very beginning, that when we get into that sliding slope, that's where things happen, and we do not want to get to that point. So let's look at a few cases that we found, and we can share that with you, and let's see what you think about it. Now, if you live in Texas and somewhere between Houston and Dallas, you will see a stretch of I-45. And on I-45, there is a bakery in Corsicana called the Collins Street Bakery. And you see two of their locations there. The one on the bottom is right smack on I-45, and you can just exit the freeway, go to this lovely place and get some pastry. Or you can turn left to Corsicana, and you see their original store there. Now, they do have a few more stores, and their products are just wonderful. The breads are wonderful, cookies are just delicious, and if you like cakes, just look at them. But they're most famous for their fruitcake. And their fruitcake is not the ones that we make fun of, that we pass around for Christmas and things like that. And they've actually been on TV shows and so on to show what the quality of the fruitcake is. And by the way, they used to have it on their website, too, of all the dignitaries that order their fruitcakes, or A-list people from Hollywood, or to presidents of the United States. Now, but what you may not know about Collins Street Bakery was they had a corporate controller. Mr. Jenkins was 66 years old when he was arrested. What happened was a little bit of the ethics turned greed, turned fraud. And what happened is that he just one day decided that, you know what, why does everybody have all the things? They have new cars and all that, and I don't. Why do people have all these country club memberships, and I don't? And I'm a good person. I'm not a bad person. And all he did was to start with one check. He wrote one check to pay his own bills. And from that little check, it grew into altogether a $60 million embezzlement. When he and his wife was arrested, they found altogether $4 million in property and cash in the house, including 4 luxury vehicles that are parked right in front of the house. And you can see the luxury items over here already, including a wine collection of about $50,000. But what is more funny is, if you look at all these things, why would people not know what's going on? Because there are no really solid controls. He is the control. He was the control. He was the corporate controller. When he took all these trips on private jets costing more than $3.3 million, and people asked the question, he just said that, well, I have a cousin that he owns these private jets and let me use it. When he and his wife purchased 38 vehicles over a period of 15 years, that's 2 new cars a year and more, and they're all luxury vehicles. And when people ask, he has another cousin that owns car dealerships and let him use all these cars and so on. What's more interesting is that he has charged over $11 million on a Black American Express card, or what we call the American Express Centurion card. I can even begin to think about an American Express Black card, because that you have to be invited to join. You just cannot apply to be a member of that. The initiation fee alone is $7,500, and each card is $2,500 for the annual fee and so on. And they used to, by the way, shop at Neiman Marcus in Dallas, and they stopped doing that because when the police asked them, they said, well, we ran out of things to buy at Neiman's. So you have people that are perfectly great people for 40-something years of their life, 50-something years of their lives, and certainly things change because a little bit of ethics turned into greed, turned into fraud. Now, we all have been to IHOP, I think, or most of us have been to IHOP. Love their pancakes and all those over here. Now, it's not IHOP that has a problem. It's not Collins Street Bakery that has a problem. It's the people that have a problem. Now, in this case, it's really fraud. Now, it may be a little bit of greed involved, but these two gentlemen, with their other 16 accomplices, opened up 7 different IHOPs in 2 different states, and they used it really for money laundering, identity theft, and so on. They will hire illegal aliens to work, and to do that, because they also don't want to pay overtime and so on, they even assign these people second identity so they don't have to pay overtime. And when money runs short, what do? They burn down one of the IHOPs, and they make up numbers so that they get a better and larger, in this case, settlement with the insurance company. And if you look at what they were doing, one of them will try to open up a false company for the other person to pay rent to him and all that. All these frauds were happening. And these 2 gentlemen, one was sentenced to 5-year jail time and another was sentenced to 8 years jail time. But if you ask me, all these white-collar crimes, sometimes maybe we should have put a longer jail time on that. Now, we talk about restaurants, we talk about a little bakery. What about hotels? Now, we all know Sleep Inn. This is a very small hotel. Each one of them maybe has 60 to 80 rooms, limited service hotel. So what happens here? In this case, they have an employee here. This one is in Michigan. And we have an employee here in over 6 years and 6.5 years time. She used the credit cards of the company and also her own credit card and the guest's credit card. And thank goodness that we have PCI compliance and GDPR and all those nowadays, and hopefully we can catch a lot more of it. But during that time, she stole over or nearly $1 million. And what she did was that she used her own personal credit card and also the debit card, used those numbers and put it on the payment side. So the customers will be charged. They will be paying the hotel, but they're not actually paying the hotel because this lady has funneled those amounts into her personal credit card and her personal bank debit card already. And on the flip side, she also concealed her own identity and started pairing her accounts and the names and the charges to mirror that of real hotel guests, so that she's making allowances and discounts to those hotel guests, but actually she's the one that's receiving all this money. Now, so when the hotel know what's going on, well, they finally caught up, but it took time for them to catch up. And actually, the former owner sold the Sleep Inn in 2013 because of poor financial performance. And if he would just only have somebody to really dig into it and look at the performance and so on, maybe he would have saved his business. And just to go back real quick, going back to the first story, the Collins Street Bakery, the reason why Sandy Jenkins was found out to be guilty or that somebody suspected it was because they hired a new 20-something accountant. And again, sometimes we joke about our millennials that they are young and, they don't know and they are thinking about things that don't have the same values as we do and so on. But this particular young lady knows what she's doing because she found a charge. It's $20-something thousand for a Federal Express charge. And she knew that the office did not send out $20-something thousand of Federal Express, so she took it to Sandy Jenkins. And, of course, Mr. Jenkins, being the corporate controller, he said, well, let me look into it. Well, he looked into it, but that was it, and didn't give the young lady a reason why or what happened to it. He just said that, I took care of it. And then something else happened, and this young lady was persistent enough that she has her own code of ethics that she thought, and she figured out that somehow something is not correct. And she went directly to the owner. And that's when the owner took some steps and figured out what's going on. So all these things are there. Now, with that, we're coming back here and look at this. We have to have a code of ethics. And many of us are either CHAE or CHTP. And if you have not taken the destination as yet, and Terry and I would totally suggest you to do that because it's a great certification to begin with. And the one thing about a code of ethics, and here we're talking about the one with the certification, is that it covers a lot of things, from professional characteristics to how we should behave in our personal conduct, especially in personal behavior, professional competence and performance, and also our responsibility to others. But the one thing that's interesting is that you see one line here that says discreditable acts. What do you mean by that? Now, if you look at the Code of Ethics, and by the way, you can download it, and if you don't want to cut and paste all these things, you can just Google HFTP Code of Ethics, and this will show up as well. But under those discreditable acts, it says if we are a CHAE or CHTP, if we're convicted of a criminal offense involving the following, we should report to HFTP. For instance, violence, dishonesty, fraud, or moral turpitude, it is our responsibility to report it to HFTP. So it's not just because I took the exam and I passed it and I got a certification that it shows that I know about accounting. It's not just that. It's that when we have a certification, we also have to hold that code of ethics. Many of you are also CPAs. You also have your code of ethics. What we're seeing is that we accept personal responsibility for foreseeable consequences, not just for our actions, but sometimes our inactions. When we see something that is not correct, just like a young lady at Collins Street Bakery, we need to report it. That's what we talk about, and that's what we mean by the code of ethics. It's not just go, okay, it's my personal ethics, I know what I need to do. But when it comes to business, as we said earlier, well, that's fuzzy. That depends on the business. That's not my responsibility. But in reality, it is our responsibility. And by the way, for those of us, again, who are CHAE and CHTP, that every 2 years when we submit our copy of our maintenance forms, we also have to sign a copy of the HFTP certification ethics policy to make sure that we review it and know of our duties and responsibilities in having these certifications. So going back to our business environment is important. And it's not just the ethics. Many of you have heard of this term, corporate social responsibility. As a corporation, we have a lot of standards. It's not just the green standard or we need to recycle and sustainability scores and so on. We need to always be in front of things. We need to keep on training. We cannot just say, oh, I have a code of ethics. It's over there somewhere. It's in the drawer. If I need it, I can pull it out. I know exactly where it is. That's not enough. As Terry said earlier, too, we need to keep on training, not just at the beginning when we were doing our orientation, but also probably some continuous training to make sure that we do the right things. So how can business promote an ethical environment? How can we do that? Well, Terry has a couple of cases that he's going to share with you right now and maybe once he reads those cases out to you, we will ask you to also give us your opinion to see how, as a business, we can promote an ethical environment. So I'm going to turn it back to Terry to look at some cases with us.
All right, thank you, Agnes. All right, let's look at a case here. Case number 1. Debbie is an insurance adjuster for the XYZ Insurance Group. She receives a phone call from the Henderson family after a massive storm went through their area. Now, Mrs. Henderson described how the storm ripped off a large section of their home, and they've lived in for the past 20 years. Now, the Hendersons have had home coverage for their home with the XYZ Insurance Company the entire time. The wind and rain damage rendered the home and contents a complete loss. So after the phone call, Debbie analyzed the file for the Hendersons. The policy indicates that there must be a roof inspection every 10 years, and the Hendersons were 2 months past due on that inspection. So our questions, we got a couple questions to think about. What is the ethical response to this from Debbie, and what's the right response? So I'm going to turn it over to Trevor to go over the poll question for this.
All right, very good. The second polling question should be on your screen momentarily. What is Debbie's ethical response? Pay the claim, deny the claim, request a backdated inspection, or change policy date so it qualifies? give everybody about 25 more seconds to fill out this polling question. Just to reiterate, the question is, what is Debbie's ethical response? Pay the claim, deny the claim, request a backdated inspection, or change policy date so it qualifies? All right, very good. At this time, we have 18% of attendees selecting pay the claim, 69% of attendees selecting deny the claim, 14% selecting request a backdated inspection, and 0 attendees have selected change policy date so it qualifies.
So that's a very interesting response. It wasn't as black and white as our first question. So we've actually had some that went all the way from the A, B, and C. Apparently nobody said to change the policy dates. But the correct answer on a professional ethics standard, as we discussed earlier, was B. The majority of you got it correct, deny the claim. Because who is the person that Debbie is in response for to do her professional duties? And that is the owners of the company. Her job is to adhere to the policies and the guidelines that are part of the organization. So her professional ethical response is to deny the claim. But some of you said to pay the claim, and some of you said request a backdated inspection. Now that gets into the personalist of the situation. It could be that Debbie was a good friend of the Hendersons. So that's where we get into what's the right response. And this is where you get into is an ethical response and a right response. You know, right response would be, in your mind, the right thing to do would be to pay the claim because they've been good customers for 20 years. But the policies are there, and she has to adhere to what the policy says. But that doesn't mean that the company, and she couldn't go to management to request a waiver for that on the behalf of the Hendersons. But when it comes to what was her ethical response and what would be considered the right response, this is where sometimes we can get into some bad situations. Because naturally the right response in our personal feelings about this type of situation is we want to take care of our customer. They've been, 2 months. Is that really going across that line in the sand that I mentioned before? They've only missed it by 2 months, so that should be close enough. Let's go ahead and play the claim. And maybe they would once it's done. But if you look at Debbie's initial response, she has to deny the claim because that's what the policy stated. Because on the flip side, what would the Hendersons expect from her if they were in adherence with the policy? So the Hendersons would expect her to do her professional ethical duty and pay the claim, even though it might be a massive amount of money. They would expect her to pay the claim if everything was in line with the policy. So that's where we have to look at the factors, and the Hendersons might think that she's not being a very nice person by denying their claim. But doing the ethical thing doesn't always necessarily mean we're doing the nice thing, correct? So I appreciate your response on that one. So let's look at the second case here. So Joyce is a controller of a country club, and she's been employed for 6 months. So she's a brand new controller. Many of us have been in that situation. While reviewing the financial statement, she noticed that the general manager had 15 charges in the restaurant last month. When Joyce was first hired, she reviewed the club policies and recalled that the general manager was entitled to eat in the restaurant, but not to exceed 5 times in a given month. Now, those of you that are in clubs, I understand this is probably not a real situation, but the next day, Joyce had the opportunity to talk to the chairman of the board and brought up the issue of the restaurant charges. The chairman told Joyce that the GM has been going through some personal issues at home, so it was okay that he was using the restaurant more than normal. Okay, our question to you, and Trevor will take this over, is?
Very good. The question is, has Joyce completed her ethical responsibilities? The options are yes or no. Just like the last couple questions, please select the best answer, and we'll go over the results in about 20 seconds. All right, has Joyce completed her ethical responsibilities, yes or no? There may be a few results still trickling in, but at this point, 83% of attendees selected yes, and 17% selected no.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So, by asking the chairman of the board, the majority of you are saying that she has fulfilled her ethical responsibilities in that. So let's look at the people that she is responsible for. Her professional duties was responsible for the whole board of directors and the members. So the answer to this question is actually no, because without having any kind of official pronouncement or official decision that has been ordained to override a policy, she has not fulfilled her duties by just reporting it to the board of directors, because her duties goes beyond just that one person. Now, in a lot of real world situations, it would possibly stop there. But what happens if a board member asks later on how this happens and addresses it to her? Then she, did not fulfill everything that she needed to do. So very interesting. Thank you for participating with that. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Agnes so she can give us some of those key things that we need to take home back to our organization. So Agnes?
And it is so true because it looks so simple, both cases that we discussed, and especially the second one, it looks like, hey, I've done my job. But really, it hasn't. So what are some things that we can do? So to end today's webinar, we would love to share with you 6 key items for us to take back to our workplace and look at how we can set up an ethical business environment. So first thing first, make sure that we have a stated code. Now, earlier we shared with you the code of ethics for the certification already. I work with the University of Houston. Obviously, we have a long code, really detailed one because we work for the state government and so on. But all of us should have a stated code in our business. And that code has to be easy to access. Everybody know where to find it. Everybody can understand it. It shouldn't be, and I kind of joke about that, because we're the state, we have a long code of ethics, but it should be long enough to take care of all the issues that might come up, but it should be very transparent that we all know where to find them. Make sure that we also continually to train and communicate, and make sure that we keep the awareness high. As we said earlier, not just in the orientation, but what about employee handbooks? What about when we do newsletters every so often to talk about that in employees' newsletter, especially when we do internal communications, that we need to tell people that, hey, if you see something, make sure we report it, help each other out, and so on. Number 3, we're going to look at top management support. We cannot just have a code and it's just sit there by itself, and the management do not really take care of what's going on. And we might want to even have something like an anonymous hotline so that when people call in, sometimes they may not feel comfortable to go all the way to the boss or the owner to tell them what's going on. But if they report it anonymously, hopefully something will be taken care of and so on. So top management support is also very important. And then another thing is, don't wait till something is wrong and then kind of whack each other's hand and so on and say, hey, somebody did it wrong. But when somebody do it right, can we not celebrate that? Can we not look at positive reinforcement, right? So look at reward programs. Make sure that when people do things right, also report it so that people know that ethical acts are appreciated in our business environment. Then number 5 is discipline. If something is not right, we need to communicate that too, that negative consequences will be there. Do not acquiesce. Do not just say that, hey, it's not my problem. I'm not going to be, in the middle of this thing. We need to be part of it too if we want to help our business to make sure that we all look at an ethical business environment. And of course, the last part is always continue, review, and upgrade. If you take a look at our Code of Ethics for HFTP for our certification, that was just updated in June of last year. And every so often we need to do that because things change. We need to be constantly vigilant and so on. So to recap real quick, make sure that we have our code, make sure that we do training and communicate with our employees, both top management and any level of employees. All of us need to have that code and know that. Obviously, top management support is very important, and we look at both positive reinforcement and also when things don't go right, we need to discipline. And we always, always want to continue review and upgrade. At this time, we are open for any questions and so on. And on behalf of Terry and Lynette and Trevor, we totally thank you for spending your afternoon with us. We know that you have a lot of important things to take care of as well. But ethics is something, and by the way, business ethics is not an oxymoron. We can have both. We can have ethics and we can make money as well. So we thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. At this time, if you'd like to submit a question, please click on the Q&A tab that you see on the left side of your screen. There you can ask a question. We do have a few questions that have come in so far. The first question is, I am with a smaller company and I'm not aware that we have published a code of ethics. So where should we start and what is the best way to put one together?
I'll go ahead and say something first, and Terry can please join in and all that too. I would think that if you don't have a code of ethics or you don't know where it might be, there's so many things online right now. Take a look at the HFTP Code of Ethics. Just download our own. Take a look at them. You want to make sure that certain parts are included in there, like what we discussed earlier. What are the personal characteristics that you want people to have? What do they need to do? They need to, when they see something, they need to report something and so on. A couple of things about the code of ethics and all that. The personal characteristics is important. And when you write something, maybe have some principles. Again, I'm going back to the HFTP Code of Ethics. Let me just highlight a few things for you. For instance, credibility, confidentiality, integrity, we used that word earlier today as well. Objectivity, professional competence, professional behavior, and technical standards. Now, the last three are more of what we can do, but the first four, credibility, confidentiality, integrity, objectivity, at least have some basic things, basic tenets that your employees will all go and look, they know what it is. So start from something small, and you can get a group together, get a committee together to write something up as well. Terry, would you like to add something?
Well, I think you're exactly right. The best starting ground is the professional ethics from whatever organization that you happen to be with. So if you're with HFTP and we have a set of ethics that you could use as a guideline. In most any industry, there's a professional association attached to it, and I would say the majority of them have all adopted ethical policies within the organization. So all those things are good resources as a starting block to build on. And then just look at your own policies that you already have in place and verify and incorporate those as part of what your ethical policy is also stating.
Awesome. We have a new question. Does HFTP have an easy-to-understand presentation for ethics that we can incorporate into orientation?
Well, I was hoping this one would be easy to understand, but that may...
Well, it's still at an hour's time, too, and I was looking at Lynette, too, to see, if the membership would like to, for us to develop something, we can absolutely do something that's, like half an hour or so, because an orientation, you have so many topics that it might be hard to carve out an hour. But, we can probably do something if the membership would like to have something that they can use or download and just have a link to HFTP so you can direct your employees to watch that link and so on. So we can definitely talk more about that too.
And reach out to the the research center from HFTP, and they might have at least some bullet points and stuff to incorporate into a presentation as well.
That's a great idea, Terry, because we can just do something that's like a one-pager that you can share with your employees and so on, so it doesn't have to be a half-an-hour thing or have somebody to talk. At least you have some talking points you can get started.
All right, very good. The next question, how does one manage an ethical dilemma when working in another country with different norms? For instance, exchanging gifts, where it is culturally unacceptable not to participate when your own culture's norms are the opposite.
I love this question. I'm going to take a stab at it first. It is very true that when you work with internationally, every country might be slightly different. So I would totally say that if you're working internationally, research some of the norms or what are the behaviors that, in the other country that they would deem that it is okay to do so. Is it bribe or is it just exchanging gifts? What is the norm over there? And if you don't participate, are you going to be viewed differently and so on? And it's so true that every country is different. I think we have a slide that talks about that, the culturals and so on. So I'm sure Terry can add more to it too.
Well, that's a very big question. If we get down to what's business ethics versus personal ethics, and this is where the line starts to get a little blurry, but in the reality of things is the practice deemed against any policies, regulations, or laws around where you're doing business. Now, the question of where your personal ethics, where it's not the norm or it's against your fiber, I guess, to participate, that's where the personal ethics and business ethics start to blend in to where do you want to participate in an organization that does policies and procedures that don't break any laws, but they seem a little shady. This is where your personal ethics kicks in, whether you want to participate with that type of organization. But in the standards, if they're not breaking any laws or policies or anything like that, then it's not really considered non-business ethical. It's just whether you want to participate in that type of organization is where it gets a little sticky.
Right.
Good questions.
Very good. And the next and last question we have today. I like the idea of training, but it's difficult for us to get together our employees for training. Even if we have time, where can we get speakers, and what would you suggest for us to do?
I think we sort of covered it a little bit, and I think Terry's idea was great that when one of the previous question asked about training and orientation and all that, is speaker is one thing, and if HFTP can be of service, if we can do 15-minute, 30-minute type of video that you can look at, that's great. Or nowadays with technology, we can always get the speaker through Skype or something that you don't have to pay for somebody to come in and all that. But I will also look at even in your own chapter of HFTP, you have great members just around you. Now, unless you don't have a physical chapter in your surrounding areas, then we can do, other things too, as we mentioned earlier, using Skype or Zoom or other things and so on that we may not be able to fly in and all that, but you can get the speaker to be there while you have a meeting and to do the training for you. But I really like the idea of, Terry mentioned earlier, to work with one of our research centers and come up with like a one-pager, so at least you have something to start with as your training.
All right, very good. I believe those are all the questions we have today. With that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining. And on behalf of HFTP, I'd like to thank everybody for attending today's event. This concludes our presentation. You may now disconnect.